In an interview with Colorado Public Radio this week, Governor John Hickenlooper said that this was not the right time to consider repealing the death penalty in Colorado. The conversation about capital punishment continues after two high-profile defendants were recently sentenced to life in prison. Mike, everyone's been talking about we have to have a conversation about this, but it doesn't sound like, at least right now, that the governor is going to be leading the conversation, especially if he's coming up with this statement that it's not the right time to repeal it. That's not the only part of the conversation, but right. Are you sensing it going anywhere?
You know what? There's very rarely a right time for a lot of people to talk about the death penalty, and it's interesting that two legislative sessions ago, a Democrat-controlled committee killed a Democrat-sponsored death penalty repeal bill. And at the time, and I believe at the time, Hickenlooper was fairly agnostic as to whether it landed on his desk or not. But they killed it because of the optics at the moment, because the theater shooting had happened. There was no verdict. There was no trial yet. And so they were concerned about the politics of the death penalty. This is not, and despite the fact that two juries have turned down the death penalty, it's not that difficult for one person on a jury to shut it down. I said, that said, the reason that was a bill and not a ballot measure was because the proponents of repealing the death penalty know that will not pass. And so this is not a good piece of politics, certainly not for the governor or for his party. So there's never going to be a good time politically to talk about this, although I think that the proponents are passionate enough that they're going to keep forcing the conversation. I think George Brockler is going to have some very good talking points that, by gosh, I tried. And you know what? A lot of people, if you talk to the Aurora Sentinel reporters who covered this, the majority of their readers seem to want the death penalty in that case. So I don't see it as talking about repealing death penalty is not a winner, certainly not for the Democrats at the moment.
And how we handle capital punishment in Colorado has been tweaked with before. And I remember we went to a three-judge panel for a while, then that was ruled unconstitutional, so went back to the jury system. And the way we have a unanimous decision required is a Colorado thing. It's not necessarily a federal thing. Do you think, if not a full repeal, is there an appetite out there to at least do some tweaking to how we approach the issue?
I don't think so. I mean, because I don't know where the tweaking would go right now. I mean, it's not as if, especially because we have a three-step process right now in putting a death penalty on somebody. So I don't think you can really make it harder in this state. I mean, I think if anything, you're going to see people saying, maybe we should cut one of these three steps out of the process. Maybe we should make it easier. Maybe we should, and I don't think this would fly, but maybe there'll be suggestions we go to a 9-3 verdict instead of a unanimous verdict. All in all, though, I agree with Mike that I don't know that there's a huge appetite to do this right now. And I said this a couple weeks ago on the show. It's especially a tough topic at the legislature because Democrats would lead the charge on this, but one of the Democratic representatives, Rhonda Fields, her son was killed by somebody who is sitting on death row right now. So do you really want to try to overrule something that matters so personally to a fellow member of your party? That said, if we're not going to talk about it now, when are we going to talk about it? I mean, seriously, there are some statements that were made after the Holmes trial that seemed to be very political. But one of them that came out was, look, if Holmes doesn't get the death penalty, who is going to get the death penalty? This is the time to say, okay, has this outlasted its usefulness? But boy, I just don't sense, especially going into an election year, that there's a lot of appetite to do that.
Miguel, everyone talks about having the conversation, yet no one's stepping up. Should someone step up, or is this a sign that really we should move on?
Well, it appears to really come in when, one, there's a case that folks are paying attention to. Usually we get national-wide coverage, then folks start talking about it. Other than that, it'll become a political issue where folks are just using it, or someone's using it to get votes or whatnot. I come back to what are we going to realize that, as Ed had mentioned, you have a gentleman that went into a movie theater with the specific intention to murder people, and to just point out, there's still the only ones on Black Row are African American.
So on death row.
On death row. Excuse me. Excuse me. And I made a mistake in the last one. It was Oh, excuse me. Anyway, so when it comes to those that are on death row, is it coming back to, is it a color issue? Is it where the NCAA, NCAA needs to get involved? Or who's going to initiate that we need to look at those that are on death row? I had a gentleman on my show that was served 32 years on death row and was found innocent and was released. So. That's a good question. Does it need to come from a color background, or should it come from those that are being convicted, and why?
Yeah, lots of issues. Patty, wrap it up for us.
Well, it makes more sense to have a conversation about it now. Maybe not a ballot measure, but the conversation we keep talking about having, rather than waiting for something more horrific to happen that might finally get someone a death sentence. So it's a conversation that should happen in Colorado. It's not that hard. Maybe the religious leaders can lead it. Maybe some of the other people who aren't running for an office but care about this issue can do it. Certainly if Brockler does run, we will be talking about the death penalty.